Thank you, friends. Shabbat Shalom, and greetings to you all. I'd like to remind you every day, indulge in a simple pleasure. It should be something easily obtainable. And you know what? You want to make sure that it's something that makes you smile. Build it into your daily routine. Learn to treat yourself to simple pleasures every day. You will be happier. I guarantee it. You don't guarantee a lot of things in life. You know, the other day we had International Holocaust Remembrance Day. It's held on January 27th every year. It was the day of liberation of one of the worst of the concentration camps. And to say it is celebrated, it's not quite right. It commemorates genocide. And we do not celebrate genocide. But it is good that we do honor and venerate a day for the victims of one of the darkest periods of man. It has been a mere 70 years since the end of the Holocaust. And sadly, my friends, European Jewry is once again questioning its future. How sad. Not long ago we all said never again. But, so let us all join together now and state that never again can such a thing happen. And we must remain ever vigilant to ensure it never happens again. As Thomas Jefferson said, eternal vigilance is the price of freedom. And we are in the midst of the great freedom story of the Bible, Exodus. And friends, freedom and bloodshed seem to go hand in hand. And one of the things you may have noticed is the deployment of blood as a recurrent motif in the literary structure of the much larger narrative. Moses is thrust from Egypt and set on the road toward his vocation as a prophet after he sheds the blood of the Egyptian taskmaster. On the way back to Egypt, it is the blood of circumcision that saves his life, which provides such a strong foreshadowing of the 10th plague that saw blood as the, so to speak, sign on the doorpost of who lives and who dies. And of course the plagues began with the turning of the water of the Nile into blood and freedom. And so in the midst of the breathless moment that is the last evening of the Israelites in Egypt, as Moses instructs them to smear their entranceways with protective blood, the narrative briefly leaps forward to a time when the Israelites, long ago liberated from Egyptian servitude, dwell in their land. And when a generation arises that scarcely knows the meaning of the commemorative Passover ritual, so that the telling has to supplement the ritualistic showing. And we are to tell that story of freedom in every generation. My friends, have we so soon reached another generation that scarcely knows the meaning of the Holocaust? Never again. Now, we're informed that 600,000 men left Egypt on foot, and this is scarcely credible. And I will remind you that the numbers in the stories are not always real numbers. They are often figurative and symbolic. And this is a parsha of enormous symbol, and this is a parsha of freedom, my friends. The Exodus as we picture it. A biblical million-man march. Friends, this is not a religious, nationalistic, or a cultural event. This is a seminal event in the history of everyone's journey to freedom, adapted so strongly by the slave generation of the American Civil War and maintained throughout the fight for civil rights. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the faithful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. This is Beshalach, when he let go, and in this parsha you will encounter the glory of the Lord for the first time, and you will see that freedom and truth go hand in hand. The Israelites leave, and God takes them via the Yam Suf, the Sea of Reeds. And friends, there has been much debate about the Red Sea versus the Reed Sea, the Yam Suf, because Suf means reeds, like in the reference to Moses and the bulrushes. But make no mistake, there are times the reference is definitely the Red, not the Reed Sea. The Tanakh refers to the eastern arm of the sea, the body of water now known as the Gulf of Eilat or the Gulf of Aqaba, as Yam Suf as well. Does it matter whether it is read or read? To some it obviously does. However, I encourage you not to let it matter. This is the start of an incredible journey, and the first of the wilderness miracles occurs. Wonder of wonders, miracle of miracles, and by coincidence, the first of the wilderness controversies. There will be many. They are led by a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. Exodus 13:20, and the Lord was going before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them on the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light to go by day and by night. The column of cloud would not budge by day, nor the pillar of fire by night from before the people. Notice, friends, the Lord himself, or herself, led them enthroned in the pillar of cloud. Much writing has been done that talks of wisdom enclosed in a cloud as a witness to creation. Can you imagine what this sight must have looked like? A pillar of cloud and a pillar of fire. Of course, like the angel of death, at some point it is no longer God, but a messenger of the Lord who takes over sitting in the cloud, leading the people through the desert. Now, this spectacular panoramic picture of the Israelite throngs following these miraculous guides through the wilderness, it just so incredibly contrasts the plagues that preceded. Several of the plagues involved destruction descending from the sky, and here a great mass of cloud descends from the sky to lead Israel. The penultimate plague plunged Egypt into terrifying darkness, and now a column of divine fire serves as a huge beacon to show Israel the way through the dark of the wilderness. Now, the cloud and fire have a two-sided functions, my friend, both conveying God's presence and reflecting God's mysteriousness. The narrative reports that Yahweh himself, he who caused to be, goes in front of the Israelites in the wilderness, but they do not see the deity because he travels in the daytime in the column of cloud and by night in the column of fire. But Exodus must be read with a consciousness that the cloud or the fire is present at all times, a constant 24-hour miracle, an introduction of the cosmic in history. One must have a sense of the awe involved in this phenomenon, particularly expressed through fire. It is a miraculously burning bush that first draws Moses, and now the people experience a similar phenomenon, a continuous, miraculous fire. Remember, this is a unique generation in the history of man, the wilderness generation, not just because of their being the forefront generation of freedom, but because they see visible miracles every day for 40 years. And friends, pay very close attention to what happens. God tells Moses in Exodus 14:2, speak to the Israelites that they turn back and encamp before Pi-hahiroth, between Migdal and the sea, before Baal-zephon, opposite it. You shall camp facing it by the sea. And Pharaoh will say about the children of Israel, they are confounded in the land. The wilderness has closed them in. And I shall toughen Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them, that I may gain glory through Pharaoh and through all his force, and the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. The wilderness has closed ground. God has just given the most precise instructions as to where the Israelites should establish their camp. So the quotation of what Pharaoh says when he hears of the Israelites' movements is an indication that God has set up what amounts to an ambush. A regular little bighorn, my friends, and like Custer, Pharaoh did not stand a chance. And once again, God hardens Pharaoh's heart, again taking his free will away in order to prove his power. Has God not simply made Pharaoh his slave during this entire series of events? Exodus 14:5. And the heart of Pharaoh was changed. In the Hebrew, by the tense and the words used, it was the same word that was used for the stick changing into a serpent, the waters changing into blood, and the changing of the wind that carried away the locusts in last week's Parsha. That is the word used to describe Pharaoh's change of heart. Now, those past cases plus the form of the verb indicate it's not Pharaoh himself, but God who causes the change. After all, he is he who caused to be. Well, maybe it's instant karma. Maybe the ultimate in Aesop's fables. Enslave someone and see what it's like. Maybe it was a required demonstration because of man's limited ability to see beyond. Maybe it's both. It is certainly something talked about thousands of years later. But has its meaning been remembered the way it was supposed to be? And even though the people were told everything that was going to happen, and the Israelites cried out to the Lord, and they said to Moses, "Was it for lack of graves in Egypt that you took us out to die in the wilderness? What is this you have done to us, to bring us out of Egypt? Isn't this the thing we spoke to you in Egypt, saying, 'Leave us alone, that we may serve Egypt'? For it is better for us to serve Egypt than for us to die in the wilderness." Talk about the devil you know. Notice the object of the blame is not God, but Moses. And this will continue throughout, my friends, setting up different types of dynamics and confrontations later between the people and Moses, Moses and God, God and the people. Now the sea splits. You know, we all know what it looks like. And it forms walls to their left and to their right. The imagery is fantastic. And mystical midrashim talk about 12 paths, one per tribe. And some talk of 72 paths for the name of God. I myself like the one path with walls on either side. Exodus 14:22. And the water was a wall to them, at their right and at their left. Can you imagine walking down that path, seeing walls of water on either side? Wow! Friends, after the destruction of Pharaoh's army, the Egyptian phase of the Exodus story is completed, and the sequence of the wilderness tales really begins. And this part, known as the Song of the Sea, is also not without controversy. Exodus 15:12. Mi chamocha be'elim Adonai. Who is like you among the gods, O Lord? And sometimes the most controversial is the most interesting. And this has actually been shown to be one of the oldest, if not the oldest passage in the Bible. And friends, it is fascinating to read what takes place. The wording in the Torah is fantastic. And you miss so much of it when you read translation. They trusted in Yahweh and in Moses his servant. Okay, big deal, some of you are saying. Why is this so interesting? They trusted. Now, this word is also translated often as believed. In Hebrew, it is vayaminu. It doesn't have the meaning here that it has in later religious concepts. That is, it does not function in the sense of believing that God exists. This notion of belief in is a modern notion. It does not occur in biblical Hebrew or in other ancient Near Eastern languages. In pagan religion, the gods being observable forces in nature, sun, sky, storm, wind, are not a matter of belief, but of knowledge. So in the conception of God in Exodus, God becomes known. God's existence and power are a matter of knowledge, not belief. When one has seen 10 plagues at a sea split, and there's a column of cloud and fire visible at all times, one does not ask, do you believe in God? Or as John Sebastian so beautifully put it, do you believe in magic? We cannot conceive of what this generation must have experienced. I'll tell you about the magic and it'll free your soul, but it's like trying to tell a stranger about rock and roll. It is so different from our use of the word. Our use of belief is more of a hope we are right. A belief in power in the Word of God is hope there is, and not knowledge of. The wilderness generation is the most unique generation of all. And it is about to become the grumbling or the murmuring generation. Watch the complaints that arise. They tend to be over food, water, and the comforts that came with slavery, as opposed to the difficulty that comes with freedom. Friends, what do you grumble or murmur about? Now, you'll also notice that with freedom comes fear. And fear is the greatest self-made enemy of man, and one you still fight every day. Now, having defeated the leader of Egypt, Moses now finds himself to be the leader of a people who never chose him to lead. And this will become a dominant theme throughout the rest of his life. Now, people love to trace this route. Friends, they love to follow the journey. Don't. We actually do not know some of the place names, and it can take away from the meaning of the story, which is why we are enjoined to mark it annually as a retelling in each generation as if you were there, but based on your own trek to freedom, your journey. The murmuring and the complaining simply continue. Oi! You see, humans focus on the visible human figure rather than on God. They complain about and to Moses and Aaron. They say, you brought us out. And Moses answers that they will soon see that Yahweh brought you out. And he tells them that their complaints are at Yahweh. And he adds, what are we that you complain at us? This projection of almost godliness onto Moses is a growing issue and a disconcerting one for Moses. Now, friends, the second permanent miracle is about to begin. And it's interesting that God says there will be a test with it. Look, I'm about to rain down bread for you from the heavens, and the people shall go out and gather each day's share on that day, so that I may test them, whether they will go by my teaching or not. And it will happen on the sixth day, that they will prepare what they bring in, and it will be double what they gather each day. And what a powerful verb God uses, rain down, mamtir. Its previous uses were associated with God's showering destruction on humanity. It was the word in the flood story, the Sodom story, and in the plagues narrative. Rain down. The rain is falling through the mist of sorrow that surrounds me. The sun could never thaw away the bliss that lays around me. Let it rain. The test is, will the people listen? They've just witnessed plagues unlike anyone had ever seen. They saw water split so that they could cross a sea. They are led day and night by a pillar of cloud and fire. They are surrounded day and night by miracles and by the knowledge that God is there. Are they going to listen or not? Exodus 16:14. And it happened. In the evening that the quail came up and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp, and the layer of dew lifted, and look, on the surface of the wilderness, stuff fine, flaky, fine as frost on the ground. And the Israelites saw, and they said to each other, Man, who? What is it? For they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, It is the bread that the Lord has given you as food, manna from heaven. It is the biblical who's on first? Man, who? The question, it is what, becomes the statement, it is what, or it is manna. I can just imagine Abbott and Costello, or is it Moses and Aaron? Man, who? Who man? Needless to say, they failed the test. Anxiety and greed have plagued mankind forever, and sadly, they still do. 6 days you shall gather it, and on the seventh day the Sabbath. The Sabbath, my friends, the word means cessation time. That's what it means. It has not yet been enjoined in the Ten Commandments. They haven't been issued. But it is assumed by the story, perhaps because of the creation story, to be part of the very structure of nature. And friends, it is. The Sabbath, the ceasing, is something that is crucial to every creature on earth. You must take time and cease what you are doing. Regenerate. If not, the battery will wear out. Now the people are thirsty, and for a change they complain, which causes Moses to say, What shall I do with this people? Yet a little more and they will stone me. On several occasions, Moses will comment that he is in fear of his life from the people. Now, Freud, of course, in his great, fantastic work, Moses and Monotheism, proposed that the people did kill Moses and developed incredible remorse for it. All of the grumbling at Moses was signs of it coming. And Yahweh said to Moses, pass in front of the people and take some of Israel's elders with you, and take your staff with which you struck the Nile in your hand, and you'll go. Here, I'll be standing in front of you there on a rock at Horeb, and you'll strike the rock, and water will come out of it, and the people will drink. And Moses did so before the eyes of Israel's elders. This too is fascinating section, my friends. You see, on a rock at Horeb means God will be waiting and standing on a mountain crag at Sinai. And there is a certain confusion because two like events take place in similar fashion with similar names. And we see water again becomes such an important part of the story. Fire and water. And in the desert, I'm sure Moses could have sung the great James Taylor song, I've seen fire and I've seen rain, I've seen sunny days that I thought would never end. I've seen lonely times when I could not find a friend. The man of water, drawn from water as a baby, whose Hebrew name invokes drawing from water, who began this trek, turning water to blood, splitting the water of the Red Sea, now will draw water from rock, the same event which will prevent him from crossing the water of the Jordan to enter the promised land. What a story! And friends, we get our first view over something that will capture the minds of theologians for centuries, if not millennia. The glory of God. And in the morning you'll see Yahweh's glory, because he has heard your complaints. The glory surrounds God when in the presence of humans. It is some sort of indescribable substance that veils or masks the deity who cannot be seen. A human will not see me and live. Even the glory itself is seen through a cloud. This is the first mention of the divine glory. It then does not occur again until the revelation at Sinai. It is impressive but also sad that its first appearance comes in response to the people's complaints over food rather than the surrounding of the Sinai Epiphany. And friends, even to this day, it would appear that human nature, apparently in need of manifest evidence that the power that brought them out of Egypt is still present, that the Exodus was just the beginning, that what comes next is the acquaintance and continuing relationship with God. I have never known the likes of this. I've been alone and I have missed things and kept out of sight. I've just seen a face. Thank you all for joining me. Love you all. Live free, be free, and honor your freedom. Be well, be happy, and be blessed. Share and honor the light and all who live in the light and continue to shine. Continue to send everyone you know goodwill and love. Pray for peace and freedom for everyone, and end to terror and hatred. And remember, friends, we are a fellowship. We learn together. We celebrate together. We celebrate each other. And yes, you were meant to be near me, and I want you to hear me. Say we'll be together every day. Thank you. See you all next time. Bless you all. Shabbat Shalom. Have a fantastic week. Thank you, my friends. Take care. Bye.